Your coworker thinks your cat is fine. Your cat thinks your coworker doesn't exist. That's the first thing you need to understand about what happens when you close the door. Cats are not indifferent to your absence. They are not emotionally self-sufficient creatures who simply wait on the windowsill until you return, unbothered, unmoved. That's the story we tell ourselves. It's a story cats have been very good at encouraging, but it's not what the cameras show. Because here's what nobody mentions when people talk about independent cats. Independence and indifference are not the same thing. A cat can choose not to follow you from room to room and still notice deeply when you're gone. The absence of visible distress is not evidence of no distress. It's evidence that cats express distress in a language most owners don't know how to read. And when researchers started actually measuring what happens inside a cat's home during the hours their owner is at work, they found something that changed how veterinary behaviorists think about the species entirely. Your cat has feelings about you leaving, specific feelings, measurable ones. And they start, like your dogs would, before you've even picked up your keys. What the cameras found. In 2015, a research team at the University of Lincoln published findings from a study that directly challenged the dominant cultural assumption about cats. They exposed 20 domestic cats to 3 different conditions: alone, with a stranger, and with their owner. They measured behavior, vocalization, and physiological stress markers across all 3. The results were not what most people expected. Cats vocalized significantly more when left alone or with a stranger than when with their owner. Not more than dogs would. Not in the same dramatic, door-scratching way, but the data was unambiguous. The owner's presence was producing a measurable calming effect, and the owner's absence was producing its measurable opposite. What made this finding complicated is what the cats did with that distress once they were alone. They didn't pace. They didn't howl. Most of them did something far more difficult to interpret. They went quiet. They sat. They waited. And if you'd walked in 2 hours later and seen them there, you would almost certainly have assumed they'd spent the whole time like that. Calm, resting, not particularly affected. You would have been wrong. The University of Lincoln team measured what's called allometric grooming behavior during separation periods. Cats that appeared completely still were showing elevated displacement behaviors. The grooming wasn't comfort. It was a coping mechanism. The stillness wasn't calm. It was a cat whose stress had nowhere obvious to go. A follow-up study in 2019 fitted cats with heart rate monitors during owner absence and found resting heart rates elevated by an average of 17% within the first 30 minutes of separation. Not dramatically elevated, not in a way that looks like panic, but elevated in the way that physiologists recognize as chronic, low-grade stress activation. The kind that, sustained over months and years, accumulates in ways that eventually show up as behavioral changes, health problems, or the kind of subtle withdrawal that owners describe as their cat just getting older.
Why cats are harder to read than dogs.
The reason cat separation distress gets missed so consistently is not because cat owners are less attentive than dog owners. It's because cats evolved to hide what they're feeling. This is not sentimentality, it's biology. Cats are what ethologists call a solitary predator species. Unlike pack animals, a cat in the wild has no conspecifics to signal distress to. There is no social group that will come when called, no companion who will notice the panting and respond. More critically, cats are also prey for larger predators. A cat that displays visible weakness is a cat that becomes a target. So cats evolved to suppress, to internalize, to show the world a face that reveals as little as possible about their internal state. This is the same reason a sick cat will often hide until the illness is advanced. The instinct to appear fine is not a choice. It is one of the oldest survival programs the species has. What this means for the modern domestic cat is that they are living with a nervous system that was designed to suppress the very signals their owners would need to recognize that something is wrong. Dr. Sarah Ellis, a feline behavior specialist at the International Cat Care Organization, has described this as one of the central welfare challenges in domestic cat populations. The animals most in need of intervention are the ones least likely to communicate that need in recognizable terms. And the owners most confident their cat is doing fine are often the owners whose cats have simply become very good at a 10,000-year-old performance. The pre-departure signal. In dogs, the research on departure cue sensitivity is well established. Borchelt and Voith documented in the 1980s that dogs with separation anxiety begin showing stress responses while their owner is still present, triggered by routines, the sound of keys, the sight of a bag being packed. Cats do the same thing. The mechanism is slightly different, the expression is quieter, but the underlying conditioning is identical. A 2020 study from the University of Veterinary Medicine in Vienna tracked the behavior of 38 cats during the 15 minutes before owner departure. Cats classified as having elevated attachment to their owners showed a consistent pattern of increased proximity-seeking behavior, heightened alertness, and what researchers termed surveillance behavior, the tendency to track the owner's movements through the house without following them. In plain terms, your cat knows you're leaving. They knew before you put your shoes on. They may have known from the moment your alarm went off at a different pitch than the weekend alarm, or from the specific sequence of sounds that only occurs on days you go out. And unlike dogs, they're not going to tell you that they know. They're going to sit there looking like they don't care while their cortisol levels quietly climb. The practical implication of this is significant. If you've ever wondered why your cat seems slightly off or overly clingy on some mornings, the answer may have nothing to do with that morning at all. It may have everything to do with what their nervous system has learned to anticipate. The cat that doesn't seem anxious at all. This is the section that matters most, and it's the section most likely to make you reconsider a cat you thought you understood. There is a specific behavioral profile in cats with chronic separation-related stress that veterinary behaviorists have started referring to informally as the quiet sufferer presentation. These are the cats that owners describe as easygoing, low-maintenance, undemanding. Cats that don't get in the way, cats that seem fine. What long-term observational studies have shown is that some of these cats are not fine. What they are is habituated to a stress state that they have stopped trying to resolve through behavior, because experience has taught them that their behavior doesn't change the outcome. This maps directly onto Seligman's 2016 revision of the learned helplessness model, originally developed through experiments with dogs, but now applied across species. Passivity, Seligman ultimately concluded, is not something animals learn. Passivity is the nervous system's default when it has been under prolonged, inescapable stress for long enough. The cat that has stopped protesting your absence hasn't accepted the situation. It has stopped believing that protest accomplishes anything. A 2021 study measuring long-term cortisol in cats through claw clippings, a method that captures hormonal accumulation over weeks rather than moments, found that cats displaying the fewest visible stress behaviors sometimes showed the highest sustained cortisol levels. Not the lowest, the highest. Because the suppression of behavioral expression does not suppress the physiological reality underneath it. The cat that seems fine might be the cat you need to watch most carefully. Stressed owner, stressed cat. In 2019, the same team at Linköping University in Sweden that found cortisol synchronization between dogs and their owners conducted a parallel analysis of cat-owner pairs. The findings were directionally consistent, though the relationship was somewhat more complex. Long-term cortisol levels in cats were correlated with long-term cortisol levels in their owners. Stressed household, stressed cat. The synchronization was not as tight as in dogs, but it was present and statistically significant. When researchers attempted to identify the direction of that relationship, whether the owner's stress was driving the cats or vice versa, the evidence pointed, again, toward the owner as the primary driver. For cats, this has an additional layer that dogs don't share. Because cats express distress so much less visibly, owners who are themselves under chronic stress are significantly less likely to notice or respond to the signals their cat is sending. The result is a household where both the human and the animal are operating under elevated stress baselines, neither one effectively communicating the state to the other, each reinforcing the other's activation without either being aware of it. What this means practically is that interventions focused entirely on what happens during the owner's absence are probably addressing the wrong variable. What happens in the 16 hours the owner is home, the quality of interaction, the consistency of routine, the emotional atmosphere of the space, is likely a far more powerful determinant of how a cat experiences the 8 hours of separation than anything left on or placed in the room while the owner is gone. What the research says actually works. The market for cat separation anxiety products is smaller than the equivalent dog market, largely because the problem is so underdiagnosed. But the interventions that exist tend to follow the same patterns: synthetic pheromone diffusers, calming collars, herbal supplements, puzzle feeders. Feel-Away, the synthetic feline facial pheromone product most commonly recommended, has a more complicated evidence base than its marketing suggests. A 2017 Cochrane-style systematic review of pheromone interventions in cats found modest positive effects in some stress-related contexts, including multi-cat household tension and veterinary visit anxiety, but significantly weaker evidence for separation-specific stress. The researchers noted that many positive findings came from studies with significant methodological limitations, including lack of placebo controls and owner-reported rather than physiologically measured outcomes. Puzzle feeders show somewhat more consistent benefit, but with an important caveat that applies directly to the separation context. Puzzle feeders provide engagement for the duration of the food. Once the food is gone, whatever state the cat was going to be in anyway is the state they return to. For cats with mild separation-related anxiety, the puzzle feeder may bridge the acute window. For cats with more significant stress, it delays rather than addresses the underlying response. What has more consistent evidence, and is significantly less popular because it is significantly more work, is a structured approach to desensitization and counterconditioning that mirrors the graduated exposure protocol used for dogs. Starting with absences of seconds. Returning before any stress response has time to build. Building a behavioral history of returns so frequent and so reliable that the cat's predictive system updates its model of what departure actually means. The critical insight from animal learning research is that what we're trying to change is not the cat's behavior during your absence. We're trying to change their nervous system's prediction about what your absence means. Every return is a data point. The more data points you provide in rapid succession, the faster the prediction updates. A cat that has experienced 50 returns in a single afternoon is a cat whose nervous system is beginning to learn something it hasn't been able to learn from 5 years of once daily returns, that you come back. That the door closing and the door opening are, as with dogs, the same event, just in different order. What cats actually do when you're gone. For the owners who want to know the specific answer to the question in the title, here is what the cameras show. Cats without significant separation-related stress spend the majority of their owner's absence sleeping, not anxious waiting, actual sleep. Their circadian rhythms are naturally polyphasic, meaning multiple sleep-wake cycles across a 24-hour period. These cats move, occasionally investigate, check food and water, and return to resting. They do not, in any measurable sense, suffer. Cats with mild to moderate separation-related stress show what researchers describe as an activation pattern in the first hour: elevated movement, increased vocalization if they're inclined to vocalize, displacement behaviors like grooming. This typically decreases in the second and third hours, not because they've settled, but because the acute phase resolves into something lower grade and harder to measure. Cats with significant separation-related stress, and these are more common than owners realize, show the pattern that mirrors what was described in dogs with separation anxiety: cycling distress with periodic spikes, sustained physiological activation that doesn't resolve, behavioral suppression that looks from the outside like calm. The difference between these cats, as with dogs, is not predominantly genetic, not predominantly breed, not predominantly age. The research points again and again to learned expectation, what the cat has been given enough repetitions to predict, what their nervous system has been given enough evidence to believe. Your cat looks fine when you walk through the door. Probably. They might glance up, they might come to you, or they might not, which you've always taken as confirmation that they didn't particularly notice you were gone. But something happened while you were out, whether it was sleep or mild surveillance behavior, or a suppressed physiological activation that never showed on the surface, and the cat in front of you now has a nervous system that has been shaped by every departure and return you've ever made. The cats that struggle most are not the ones who make the most noise. They're the ones whose nervous systems stopped trying to communicate that something is wrong, because nothing they did changed anything for long enough. They are the cats sitting quietly on the sofa who look up when you walk in, with an expression that seems to say nothing in particular. And the thing is, they're not wrong to look that way. You're here now. That is, genuinely, the most important piece of information they have, which means your return is still the most powerful intervention available to you. How you come through that door, what you do in the first 10 minutes, whether the pattern of your presence is something their nervous system has learned to associate with safety or with unpredictability, or with the kind of low-grade emotional weather that means nothing is quite calm. The cameras have been running for decades. What they show is not what we expected when we decided cats were the easy pet, the independent one, the one who didn't need much. What they show is an animal who has been paying very close attention, who has learned the shape of your routines at a granular level you have probably never noticed, who has a nervous system calibrated against yours, month by month, interaction by interaction, and who is, in their own very quiet way, waiting for you to come home. If this changed how you think about what your cat experiences while you're at work, subscribe and leave a comment. Does your cat show any signs before you've even reached the door?